Hi, it's Alex James, and I am back with another sneak preview of a book that's in the works. I have never written anything even like this. I usually stay away from anything close to this, but it was a concept that was so funny that, to me anyway, I have a weird sense of humor, that I had to go ahead and give it a shot. It's called The Scotsman's Ghost. It's coming out on November 4th, 5th, the Monday, right before Election Day. So if you need something to take your mind off all the craziness that's going on, this is probably the book that'll do it, because it's completely fluffy and silly. And yes, it is a Christmas themed book. It starts out right actually after Darcy comes to Netherfield, so it's not entirely Christmas the entire time, but it's also coming out in November, so you'll be able to kind of ease yourself into the Christmas season as the story commences. But what happens is that Darcy finds out that he has inherited some property from somebody he didn't even know he was related to, or had no connection to. This person said, "No, this is my heir. He needs to have all my personal effects." And it turns out that it's just a bunch of junk. He's like, what is this? And among this junk is a brooch that came from Scotland. It was from the time of the uprising, which had been about 80 years before this time. And this brooch is cursed. So Darcy accidentally pricks his finger on this thing, and then he starts seeing this wild, crazy Scotsman. So I'm actually going to read you a little sample of, he had seen this thing and kind of passed out the night before. And so he blames it on drinking too much, because he and Bingley had a nightcap. So this is the next morning. And by the way, this is the morning that Elizabeth Bennet is going to show up at Netherfield looking for her sister. So just a little background there, and you'll see why that's funny here in a minute. To me, this is hilarious because, again, I have a weird sense of humor. You can blame my husband for that. He probably did most of it to me. Okay, here we go. I woke with a pounding in my skull, my mouth as dry as sand, and the distinct sensation that something was terribly wrong. For one, I was lying face down at the foot of the bed, wearing breeches and a rumpled shirt for some reason, my head resting uncomfortably on top of the covers like some discarded piece of baggage. My limbs felt stiff, and my stomach churned with the unmistakable queasiness of too much brandy. I groaned, dragging myself upright, and immediately rubbed my head. The ache in my temples flared painfully, and I pressed my hands harder against my scalp as though I could knead the headache out of existence. What on earth had happened last night? Flashes of strange images crossed my mind. Dark shadows, a wild-eyed man, and what had he been saying? Something about bringing him back? Nonsense. Complete and utter nonsense. I let out a ragged sigh. It had to have been the brandy. Far too much of it. I had not thought I drank that much, just a nightcap with Bingley, but there was an empty bottle on the floor. That must have been what had happened. I'd imagined it all. Had too much to drink and imagined it all. No wonder I felt like I'd been trampled by a horse. This is absurd, I muttered, my voice rough from sleep. Just a wild dream. I swung my legs off the bed, stumbling slightly as I stood. My body protested every movement, aching from being twisted in an awkward position for what must have been hours. Too much drink, and too little sense. I should have known better than to let Bingley talk me into staying up for that nightcap. Still grumbling to myself, I staggered over to the basin. Splashing some cold water on my face would surely clear the last remnants of this ridiculous dream. I leaned over, splashed my face, and wiped my eyes with a towel. But when I glanced up at the mirror, my heart nearly stopped. There, reflected behind me, was the wild-eyed man again, Ewan, if I remembered that part of the dream correctly, looking over my shoulder with an almost curious expression. I froze, every muscle locking up in terror. For a split second, I told myself this couldn't be real, but when he raised an eyebrow, I screamed. Not the dignified, stern kind of shout one might expect from a man like me. Oh no, this was a full-throated, soul-leaving-my-body sort of scream. The kind usually reserved for surprise proposals and armed highwaymen. I bolted for the door, my feet sliding on the floorboards and my limbs flailing. All thoughts of composure, breeding, and every shred of decency went flying out the window. You'll have to bear with me. I do not have a Scottish accent. You're just going to have to use your imagination. "Ach, lad, there's nae need to keen like a banshee," Ewan's voice trailed after me, but I was too busy fleeing for my life to care. Out in the hallway I ran, my untucked shirt billowing around me, bare feet slapping against the floor in a manner I was sure would haunt me later. I didn't care. I just had to get out. I reached the landing, and there he was, standing at the bottom of the stairs like he'd been there all along, arms folded, face full of complete boredom. "You're no going to outrun me, you know," he called up, looking for all the world like he was lecturing a child about stealing jam. I let out a sound somewhere between a yelp and a very manly grunt. No one would ever call it a squeak, certainly not. And spun around, charging back the way I came. The panic bubbling inside me surged like some wild animal, and reason had completely fled the scene, much like I was trying to. "You'll wear yourself out, lad," Ewan called, his voice infuriatingly casual, as if this were all a bit of morning exercise. I pelted down the corridor headlong into the next staircase. This was absurd. This couldn't be happening. Ghosts weren't real, and even if they were, they had the good sense to remain in tragic ballads, not in my bedroom. My dog is scratching his ear. That's what he does when he scratches his ear. I don't know why. I'm sorry about that. But then, halfway down the stairs, I skidded to a halt. Ewan was standing at the bottom again, looking far too pleased with himself. This ghost, was popping up like an unwanted relative at a dinner party. "Come now, Darcy, this is getting a wee bit ridiculous." He gave a long-suffering sigh, as though he were speaking to a child about having a tantrum over vegetables. "You'd think you'd never seen a spirit before." I let out another undignified yelp and darted down the hall, heart hammering in my ears. Or was that my pride beating itself to death after this series of humiliations? This was insanity, complete, unadulterated madness. But still, I had no desire to be seen by anyone else in this ridiculous state. The servants were stirring already, and the very idea of Mrs. Nichols spotting me, barefoot and wild-eyed, tearing down the hall like a madman, made me consider launching myself out of a window. I didn't have the courage for that, though, so I did the next best thing. I spotted the service staircase, hidden away near the far end of the hall. I lunged for it like a man lunging for the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. Flinging open the door, I threw myself down the narrow, creaking steps, 2 at a time. There wasn't much space to maneuver, but it wasn't like I was doing much thinking anyway. "Ach, now you're making a right fool of yourself," Ewan's voice followed me, his tone dripping with exasperation. "I cannot be rid of you that easy." I wasn't listening. I couldn't be. If I slowed down for even a moment, I'd have to face the fact that my life had taken a sharp, deeply unwelcome detour into the world of ghosts and curses. Either that, or it was the worst hangover I'd had since university. Down the stairs I went, hurtling myself toward the back of the house. Each step groaned beneath my weight, and I could practically hear the house mocking me for my complete and utter lack of dignity. But I kept going. I had no other choice. The moment I hit the stone floor, I slammed open the door to the servants' entrance and practically fell out into the cold morning air, my feet skidding on the wet ground. I clung to the side of the house, gasping, hair clinging to my face in an undignified and, frankly, sweaty mess. The chill of the dawn hit me, sharp and biting, and as I stood there, panting like a hare that had just escaped the hounds, I had never been so grateful for fresh air in my life. But I also had never been more utterly, completely, certifiably done with everything. "I'm going mad," I muttered to myself. "That's it. I've lost my mind." But I didn't dare look behind me. If that mad Scotsman appeared again, I'd likely faint outright, and that was a humiliation I wasn't ready to face just yet. I don't know what he's doing. Anyway, so there is a little preview for you of how Darcy gets outside and has his first encounter with Elizabeth at Netherfield. You can imagine it's probably going to be a little embarrassing for him. This book is entirely about Darcy being put in a really embarrassing spot. Everybody starts thinking he's certifiably insane, like cracked. And that's just the beginning. And yes, there is a Christmas twist to this. It will definitely resolve in some midnight kissing, which is always fun. So anyway, there it is. That's a preview of Scotsman's Ghost. You'll be seeing it on, I think it's November 5th. So prepare your readers, and I'll see you then. Bye.